Hey, welcome to Lesson 8 in our series, The Leadership Style of Nehemiah. I am your Adventure Bible Studies guide, Jimmy Seitz. Thanks for joining me today. Well, our Nehemiah series is coming to a close, and after this, we only have 2 more lessons, and there's no way on earth I'm going to cover all the chapters left in Nehemiah in just 3 little lessons. But it is my goal to show you the leadership style of Nehemiah, not to just do an exegetical study of the entire book. So by the time you finish, you're going to be able to walk away with some very useful tips and an understanding of Nehemiah's leadership skills, his attributes, through his actions and through his patterns. I pray these are going to be applicable to your daily life and that you will not have wasted time by viewing up to this point. I want you to become a better leader, and you'll be able to use it in a lot of areas of your life, Lord willing. Now, we come to chapter 4, and we find the opposition. It's a very important section for us to look at the leadership traits, especially through this man named Nehemiah, because the opposition really steps up their game in this chapter. Let's look at chapter 4, 1 through 3, where we find a fellow named Sanballat. He's the leader. And then you got Tobiah, who is his right-hand man. Now, we met Sanballat back in chapter 2. Here's what it said. He heard that we were rebuilding the wall, and he was furious. Now, have you ever been furious? I mean, that's more than mad. It's like mad with a capital M and a capital A and a capital D with an exclamation on it. And it says he mocked the Jews before his colleagues and the powerful men of Samaria. These were men above Jerusalem in that region before you get up to Galilee. It's kind of that middle region, and that's where the palace of Ahab and Jezebel was at. I've actually been able to go in and explore the ruins of that palace back in the time when you wouldn't get killed if you were there. And man, it was amazing. Now, the Bible goes on to say, he said this, "What are these pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever finish it? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble?" Then Tobiah the Ammonite, who was beside him, said, "Indeed, even if a fox climbed up what they were building, he would break down their stone wall." They don't know how to build a wall. That's what he's saying. So what we have here is the lead antagonist and his right-hand man. And if you were to envision them, you'd probably envision one big guy, maybe one small guy. That's kind of how it works a lot of times. At least that's how they're portrayed in a lot of Hollywood movies. And that's what we have in this opposition here in chapter 4. And we're going to find out later that there are more than just these 2 guys. Now let's look at chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. We have a very odd response from Nehemiah. He says a prayer. Wait, what? We expect that, right? Because we know Nehemiah has spent a lot of time in very deep prayer when he wept and he mourned and he fasted and he prayed for several days. But really, do we really expect that? Or do we expect opposition, fight back? Well, Nehemiah's a very unique man. You might write down how he responded. We also know that later on he had a breath prayer when the king actually gave him an opportunity to speak. So once again, we're going to see this short little prayer from Nehemiah that comes from a very deep prayer life when the opposition faces him. Here's what he says. "Listen, our God, for we are despised. Make their insults return on their own heads, and let them be taken as plunder to a land of captivity." In other words, hey, do with them what's already been done with us. And he goes on to say, "Do not cover their guilt." Wow. Now, aren't we supposed to be praying for the salvation of people? Aren't we supposed to be showing love and turn the other cheek and all that good stuff? That's what we've all been taught through our children's Bible and through our courses growing up and our Bible teachings at church and our parents and all that. Maybe a babysitter that was a Christian. Well, I mean, of course it's true and it's right. We should never forget that we should forgive people and love people, but also we should never forget there's another response called Christian warfare, spiritual warfare. That side where God is a warrior God and we are soldiers in his army. And there are times possibly when a prayer like this might actually be appropriate. Wow. That's kind of a stretch for a preacher to say, right? Well, I just said it. Here's what the Bible says. He prays this. Nehemiah says, "Do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders." Like I said, that's kind of an odd prayer, is it not? but not if it's coming from a general, a guy that's somewhat leading an army, so to speak. Well, let's keep going. Verse 6. Here we have the outcome of Nehemiah's prayer. Here's what it says. So we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had the will to keep working. The wall was joined together, which was pretty miraculous. I mean, it's like that tunnel that I heard about that they built. It was under the English Channel where they started on one side and they started on the other side, and it actually met in the middle. I know there are other tunnel projects like that, maybe they've been only off by 6 or 12 inches and they're able to easily make it match. That's just incredible to me. And the fact that these guys and these ladies there rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem up to half its height in such a short amount of time and days, it's just incredible. It all came together. It matched. It was a great accomplishment architecturally, especially considering what they had to work with. So that was one of the outcomes of the prayer. And it says the people had the will to keep working. Well, I believe that too was an outcome of the prayer. The people had the will to keep working even though there was great opposition. There were furious people that wanted them dead because of what they were doing, and they were working under death threats. Sometimes righteous anger can be a great motivational factor. Think about Jesus when he cleansed the temple area. That was some serious righteous anger right there when he drove moneylenders out with a whip and turned their tables over. Have you ever been angry because of things that were wrong to the point that you did something about it and what you did was good? That's righteous indignation. That's righteous anger. And these people were motivated by the bad things that were being said and done. I'll never forget a time when my son Jonathan was playing high school football, and he went to Beach High School in Hendersonville, Tennessee. And in the year 2009, the football team was really making a good run to possibly get to the state championship game, maybe even do well in that game. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, fast forward, they won it for the first time ever, the 5A state championship for Beach High School. And it was amazing. Well, my son Jonathan, who was the co-captain of the football team, was having a really good year, and we were getting ready to play an away game, I think at Mount Juliet. And whoever won that game was going to host the first round of the state playoffs. So it was a very big-time, important ball game. A couple of days before the game, my son gets a box delivered by FedEx to the front door of our house. He opens it, and it includes about 30 pair of women's underpants, and it had a note in there that says it's from the Mount Juliet coach. This note had some really serious things to say about the beach football team and how they were panty waist or whatever. And they don't need to show up for the game, and you just need to wear these instead because you're not going to win. Your football pads aren't going to make you any difference. Now, I don't really think that the Mount Juliet coach sent that. As a matter of fact, I know he didn't. I think it was probably somebody from the team, maybe a dad who was a little overzealous, and he will not admit it to this day. We really don't know who it was. He's not going to own up to it because he's probably going to get in a little bit of trouble for that. But you know what? My son took it to the locker room. He showed this box and the note to the players, and these gullible high school kids believed it. And it fired them up like I have never seen them get fired up. Final score, Beach, the visiting team, 49, Mount Juliet, 48. How about that? Double overtime. So there's that thing I'm talking about. Sometimes anger can be a great motivational factor rather than allowing it to stop you from doing what you're doing. Now in verses 7 and 8, we have the opposition strengthening because they don't seem to be gaining ground. So what they want to do is just kind of ramp it up or amp it up. And we have Sanballat, his right-hand man Tobiah. And then this verse lists others. And we begin to see who this opposition team is. When Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the repair to the walls of Jerusalem were progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So you got some folks here named, and I've spent time with some of these groups of people, and some of them can get pretty, I don't know what the exact word would be, passionate, strong emotions. And I've got some stories, and I'll just leave them at that, all right? There are times when you just don't mess with a certain group of people because they can be pretty volatile. And you got all these groups of people here listed that are joining in together to form a bullyship, if I can make up a word. And when they hear about the repairs to the walls of Jerusalem, they became what? Well, there's that word again. Furious! Exclamation mark. That's the emphatic in the original Hebrew. I mean, they were mad. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem, throw it into confusion. And I think we've seen a little bit of confusion in our own political arena over the past couple of months and years here in America, haven't we? Well, you know what? It's a great tactic, is it not? Nehemiah has a response to that as well. I mean, what do you expect from a great leader like Nehemiah to do in this situation? He does what a great leader should do. He prays. Do you see his faith in God? Do you see his reliance upon God? Do you see how he's working for God? He's on assignment by God. Here's what it says. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. You have the response of pray, then you have the response of act. That's very important when you look at the scheme of how Nehemiah thinks and how he operates as a great leader. Now look at verse 10 of chapter 4. A rumor mill begins. It's coming from the people of Judea, and that's the hillside surrounding Jerusalem and thereabouts. Here's what it says. In Judah, it was said, the strength of the laborer fails, since there is so much rubble. We will never be able to rebuild the wall. Well, basically, what we have here are pessimists. And pessimists are not in the exact same category as furious opponents, but they can really derail a project, especially if you listen to them. So I would hope that you don't. Look at verse 11. And our enemies said, they won't realize it until we're among them and can kill them and stop the work. So these various groups of people all coming together, so mad, they're willing to take the lives of these citizens of Jerusalem. I mean, that's pretty mad. That's furious. And they were going to infiltrate in. They were going to sneak in like enemies. They were going to go in like wolves in sheep's clothing that Jesus later references. And he has other metaphors to refer to people like this too. And you know what? I've pastored churches before, and in every church I've pastored, there have been people there that were what I would call pseudo-Christians, false Christians. They claim to be Christians. Some of them have worked their way up into the positions of authority and leadership within the church. And they're there to create, what word do you think I'm going to use? I'm going to use the word confusion, which is interpreted chaos. And they'll often get their way. And if they don't get their way, then they're going to really try to keep other people from getting their way. I've seen this in political battles in churches to the point that it will split churches. You ever seen a split church? It's a terrible thing, and it will turn a lot of people off. Well, that was their tactic, except for one more thing. They wanted to kill Nehemiah. They wanted to sneak in, not just create confusion. They wanted to kill the very one, or ones, plural, who were in there working on the wall. Quite a number of folks. And as we find this out, we see in Nehemiah's response to this, the fueling of the fire by opposition. It's in verses 12 and 13. When the Jews who lived nearby arrived, they said to us time and again, everywhere you turn, they attack us. So I stationed people behind the lowest sections of the wall, at the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. So Nehemiah stationed people behind the lowest section of the wall at the vulnerable areas. I mean, you always fix the weak spots first. You always protect the weakest before you protect the strongest, and that's what he did. That's a military tactic. And he did this by family units. Now that's smart. What better way to be motivated than to protect your families that you have with you, right? He used swords, spears, and bows to do so. He gave them these, the swords, the spears, and the bows. So these were their weapons that they had available to them. Here's what he said in verse 14. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord, and fight for your countrymen. Fight for your sons and daughters, your wives and homes. Now what he's doing here, he's kind of like Mel Gibson playing William Wallace, the 13th century Scottish warrior, that late 13th century when he rallied the troops. Maybe you've seen that. You probably remember the mooning scene. He's going up and down and he's screaming and all that stuff, and then they all kind of just go to war. You know, that's basically what Nehemiah is doing right here. He's rallying the troops. He's motivating the troops, and he's telling them, we can do this. Don't you be afraid of them. We're better than them. We're bigger than they know we are. It's a great example of a leader and what a leader does with a positive approach to negativity. Now, not only that, he's got a track record that he can point back to. And that track record is how God has rescued his people time and time and time again. Guys, he's saying, do you remember what he did with the people coming out of Egypt when they parted the Red Sea? Do you remember the time when Moses struck the rock and water came out? Do you remember the time they grumbled for food and God sent manna and quail? Do you remember the time when? And he's helping them remember all of these things. I mean, what about the time David went up against Goliath? Everybody loved David. I mean, he was the rock star hero of the country. He goes up against Goliath as a teenager, and he's got nothing but a stick and a stone, and yet he kills the giant and cuts his head off and kept the sword his whole life. So he's helping them remember these stories of victory. A great leader will do that. He'll remind people it has been done in the past by people just like you, even some of your own ancestors, and it can be done again if you're willing to step up to the challenge. So he motivated them big time, and this shows how power works. It's a great leadership strategy to show power in order to keep peace. That's one of the greatest strategies for the military as well. The military exists to keep the peace. Policemen exist to be peacemakers, but sometimes they have to show a power of force in order to create the peace that we all want. So I think that's what's happening here as he's arming his small little army, his workers with swords and spears and bows. And by the way, really truly look at the weapons for just a moment. Spears can be thrown. Arrows can be shot even further. And swords are for the up-close hand-to-hand combat. He's got all the bases covered here. It's not like they only have swords, so you can just go over the wall and get in there on them hand-to-hand. No, if you even show up close, you may get a spear in the chest. You may get an arrow in the leg or the eye. You may bleed out. I mean, that kind of helps a little bit, does it not? It's one thing to have a handgun to go into battle. It's another thing to have a rifle that shoots 1,000 yards like a sniper. Or for that matter, the bombs that the jets can drop. So he's doing what he can to arm his people correctly for an advance of the enemy. Verse 15, it worked. In verse 14, Nehemiah makes that speech, and then in verse 15, he's this show of power working guy, and he shows power in order to create peace. It says this, when our enemies heard that we knew their scheme and that God had frustrated it, every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. Verses 16 through 18 portray his next step. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half held spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers supported all the people of Judah who were rebuilding the wall. The laborers who carried the loads worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the one who sounded the ram's horn was beside me. This fits well with the theme that I gave to chapter 3, and that was divided in unity. So what we have here is Nehemiah dividing and conquering. He's conquering both the project and the enemy. He divides to conquer, just like he's dividing groups to accomplish work on the wall, which we talked about as we were working our way up to this chapter and going through that map in lesson 7. So he takes about half of his people and turns them into a protective army, while the other half works on the wall. The other half who are working with a sword in one hand and a hammer in the other. So everyone's ready, and the work is continuing, even though it had to be a little bit slower. It continued while the protection was increased because the opponent was increasing in a furious manner with their plan to try to kill and cause confusion and chaos. That's how Nehemiah used strategy. Notice that Nehemiah called the shots. I mean, a good leader is going to call the shots. A good leader listens to everyone, he gets information, and then he calls the shots because he might get some great ideas from other people. But ultimately, somebody's got to call the shot. A good leader is always willing to be prepared for action. And we see Nehemiah prepared in a really big way, don't we? Did you notice that he kept the trumpeter right next to his side? Go back to verse 18. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the trumpeter was beside me. That's similar to the President of the United States always having the nuclear football wherever he goes with the general that's holding the code to it. So Nehemiah has the trumpeter there who sounds the alarm whenever there could be a problem, and everyone would immediately know what to do. See, a good leader is always prepared for action. Now look at verses 19 and 20. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is enormous and spread out, and we are separated far from one another along the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the ram's horn, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. Did you notice that last line? It's in the emphatic in the Hebrew, which means it's got a big time exclamation mark at the end of it. Warrior God. That's the way Nehemiah sees God. That's the way Nehemiah presents God. Nehemiah announced his preparedness to his workers, and he expressed a very confident attitude that God would fight for them, with them, before them, and he's once again reminding them of the great stories of old when God had come through for the Israelites. I hope you'll take heart today and remember that your warrior God is bigger than anything that you're dealing with. And I encourage you to take your problems to him and let him fight for you. Now, as we come up to the last two lessons, we're going to see the outcomes of Nehemiah's leadership through all of this, and we're going to go over our list of leadership tips and traits that we can apply to our daily lives. Until then, God bless.